Welcome to Barbecue Catering Smarts, the go-to podcast for barbecue operators looking to grow and streamline their catering operations. Every episode, we're serving up expert advice, proven systems, and flavorful strategies straight from top leaders in the barbecue and catering world. So fire up the pit. It's time for another sizzling episode.
Hello again, I'm Michael Attias, your host of Barbecue Catering Smarts, and today's guest is Jim Lenzen, owner of Jimmy L's. Jim has built a reputation for delivering bold, crowd-pleasing barbecue while handling the real-world demands that come with catering, from large-scale events to high expectations around consistency, timing, and execution. As a hands-on operator, Jim understands that great barbecue catering isn't just about the food, it's about preparation, systems, and making sure every event runs smoothly from loadout to last bite. He brings a grounded, practical perspective shaped by years in the business, and we're excited to have him on the show today. But before we get started, let's take a moment to recognize our sponsor, Catering Catering Software. They help barbecue restaurants turn their catering chaos into calm. Discover why barbecue restaurants trust Catering to save them time and increase catering sales. Go to caterzen.com and sign up for a walkthrough of the software. Now let's dive into this episode of Barbecue Catering Smarts. Welcome, Jim. How are you doing today?
Good, sir. How are you?
Great. Before we get going, love to do an icebreaker question. Give me a number between 1 and 300.
24.
Ooh, okay. If you suddenly lost 2 hours every day, a 22-hour day, what would you cut out of your current schedule to accommodate for the lost time?
Just 2 hours of sleep.
How many hours of sleep do you get now?
About 6, maybe 4.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I could handle 2 to 4 hours. Maybe you're younger, you can deal with that. So, before we get in, I always like to ask people, how'd you get in the business?
Kind of weird, I guess. I worked for a wind farm years ago when they first came out here, and I ended up doing all the weekend cooking. Every Friday we barbecued, and so my old boss, he ruined like $500 worth of steaks one time, and I told him, if you ever touch my grill again, I'll kill you. And so then I ended up cooking for my entire crew, and it just morphed into what it morphed into.
So, when you think about a wind farm, my fiance's from Michigan. We pass by wind farms all the time. I didn't know they had windmill ranchers that are out there. I guess, like anything else, they got to take care of the equipment and make sure it's all operational.
Yep, and that's what I did. And then after that, I went to teaching those guys to do it for 10 years, and they do a good job with it.
So when did you open up your own shop?
We did our first wedding, was the very first thing we did. That was 17, 18 years ago. One of the buddies I worked with never catered anything, and we just 100% fully winged it, and then it just kind of took off.
You look pretty young. Did you start at 17 or 18 doing this?
No, I'm a little older than you think I am. You're giving me a lot of credit.
Maybe it's a ball cap. I don't know. Well, good for you. So, do you have a restaurant or you just do catering and concessions?
4 concession trailers. We run a large catering operation, and then January through May 1st, every Friday, we run a restaurant with only 2 menu items.
Brisket and beans.
No, it's whatever I want to cook that week. It can go from, like last week, we did burn-ins, rib, pulled chicken, brisket, sausage, and then this week's a tri-tip with a smoked chimichurri, fancy potato.
Oh my God.
Just whatever I want to cook. We're in a town of 5,000 people, so this is our 4th year doing it, and everybody's kind of grabbed a hold of it, and they just kind of enjoy it. And
So how many hours are you open for on a Friday?
we open 3 times. I think we're elapsing about 2.5 hours before we sell out.
That's the best problem to have, is a sellout.
It's a good one.
So is this out of like a warehouse you have for equipment, or is it a restaurant, or where are you serving out of?
No, we've got a full blown venue restaurant setting in our warehouse, the front half of it. When I got the building, it had a big bar in it, and so we're like, well, let's use this thing.
So during the I'm assuming because you're in Nebraska and everyone's freezing their tails off, that's why you open on Fridays. There's probably not a lot of weddings and events in the winter because it's too cold. So you're using it as sort of keeping busy and having some fun and making a few bucks.
Yeah, I don't know if there's money made doing it, but it keeps me busy, gives me something to do, and it's a challenge.
Fun. So one of the things we talked about offline was certified beef, certified brisket. I think the average person, you've heard of Wagyu beef, right? And other brands. For someone listening that's not familiar with certified beef, explain what it is and why would I want to use certified beef versus, is a brisket not a brisket is not a brisket?
So a brisket's a brisket, but a brisket isn't a brisket. I don't know how many briskets you've cooked, but we cook thousands of them. And the thing about briskets is some people like big ones, some people like small ones. I prefer anywhere between that 12 and 18-pound range. And so the certified meat, what it does for us, it guarantees me that. It also guarantees me that it's American made.
So are you telling me that there are people getting briskets from China or wherever?
Argentina, Australia, Venezuela, Mexico, Canada, those are your major importers. Ecuador imports some. So I just want to control my product. We use Greater Omaha certified Herefords, and those are mostly coming out of Western Nebraska.
Is that a better quality beef than you might get
Yeah,
from in Mexico? What makes it,
yeah.
again, I'm an amateur, right? I just go to the grocery store, I buy a brisket. And, when I had my barbecue restaurant and out of, we were based out of Memphis, but my store's in Nashville. It was 90% pork, ribs, pork shoulder. So brisket wasn't a big seller for us. So what's the advantage or the differences of certified Nebraska versus an import?
So about 12, 15 years ago, our distributor accidentally sent us the Greater Omaha Hereford beef, and I cooked it, and I could tell there was a richer, better flavor for it. And so I was like, okay, there's something to this. And then I switched. And then as I started doing research, I was like, wait a minute, this is coming out of from ranchers and people I know. This is a better product. And you can tell the difference. I think it has a much richer flavor.
Yeah, I think the same thing with steaks, right? You know, once upon a time, Outback had a decent steak, but now if you eat an Outback steak versus a Ruth's Chris or, Morton's, you can side by side, you can tell there's a big difference, right? How are you using that as a marketing advantage in what you sell? Because I would imagine you have some competition in your
Yeah,
market.
there's quite a bit of competition with what I do and where we travel. But for me, we're not looking our trailer business is our trailer business and our summer catering business is the majority of our business. And when we're doing our catering business, we want return customers. We're not just looking to make a dollar. And same with our trailer business, running 4 trailers. And the mentality in that vending business is get your money, move on. We'll take your money next year, so on. I want to grow that into my vending customers into catering customers. And, people remember our brand.
So when you talk about trailers, are you doing like state fairs and crafts fairs and big events where you roll up and you're you know, selling to individuals? Is that
Yes.
but you're not going to a office parking lot and setting it up on a Wednesday, are you?
It depends. In the winter, we do a little bit. We've established some of these smaller towns that want want us to come and do that. But you're not making a lot of money by doing that. Like, you're just staying busy and
So
just keeping your name out there.
so if you go out to a state fair or a big event, what would a big event, how many trailers are you pulling out and what can you What's a range of what you can sell at an event?
Range, what, a dollar wise?
Yeah,
Or
dollar
looking
wise. Yeah, dollar wise.
anywhere from probably, I would say, 3 to 15,000 a day is a good dollar amount.
Is that from one trailer?
Yes.
And you mentioned something that I think's really important. A lot of people think the one of my marketing mentors say a lot of people think the purpose of a customer is to make a sale. The But he says the purpose of a sale is to make a customer. And you talked about we want those trailer clients to become catering clients, right? Because you never know that person who loves your sandwich or ribs or whatever it is, they could have a wedding for 250 on their, at their church for their kid, or be involved in a groundbreaking, or be plant manager for a big. How far out will you drive to cater?
We did a wedding in 6 different states this year.
Boy, oh, separate weddings in 6 states.
Yeah.
So you'll drive 2, 3 hours for a big event,
We're in Western Nebraska. Just to go to the next town is 20 to 30 minutes, so we have to drive regardless.
and you're rolling up, cooking on site, and
It Yes and no, it just depends on what the menu is.
yeah, wow. And what's the biggest event you've ever done?
We do the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, which is a big one. We've hosted some corporate parties, about 1,300 people.
So it's about 1,300, 2,000, your biggest?
Yeah, around there.
So the people listening, one of the things I did when I had my barbecue restaurant is I drew a map 2 hours, draw a circle 2 hours around Nashville, and I said, "Hey, what major employers are there out in the country?" Right? In Nashville, there's a lot of competition, but when you go to um, Lewisburg, Tennessee, right? The barbecue restaurant's out of a shack, right? It's the equivalent of a quarter wide. I mean, it's nothing. They can't cater for 800 people 3 shifts. They don't have the equipment. They don't have the people. We roll in from Nashville. It's an hour and a half drive for us. They're happy to get a good product that can handle coming at 3 a.m. and feeding 20 people. So we made a good bit of money by going to these smaller towns, finding the big employers, and whether it was safety luncheons, holiday meals, um, um, grand openings, picnics, whatever it was a good chunk of change. How did you go about building your business?
For us, we're looking for ranchers. We're looking for those good, solid ranch communities that we have kind of a rule. We don't wanna work anywhere that we're not welcome, so we work in a lot of these rural ranching communities.
And so, are you specifically barbecuing for the ranches, or just people in those communities because they're good blue collar, want good food?
Both. We try to work with people that have our same values and, you know, way of thinking, and that way we get along with them, have conversations. It just develops into relationships that way.
Yeah, I forgot who came up with it. Is you want to do business with people like, and trust, people who are like you. And ultimately, my best clients have always been the ones I get along with on a personal level. I'd go have a beer with after work, and then the people I don't get along with, they probably don't stay for whatever reason, or they're just not fun to work with.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so did you do any outbound marketing to grow your catering business, or was it all referral, word of mouth?
It became referral word of mouth as we've expanded out. We're now having to push some outbound, but still we're taking, I would say, probably 70% of what we take in is word of mouth and direct referral.
So the outbound, talk about that. What's that look like for somebody listening who wants to get bigger events, right? Because you specialize in that. I'm sure you're not doing, uh, your money's not made on a drop off catering for 20 people in an office. Your money's made off a 200-person event, 500-person event, big wedding, whatever, right? What's that outbound
Yeah.
look like for you?
So we do, the social medias. We're big on all platforms on social media. We broke it down to what age group and what type of client we're looking for using which social media platform. And, we do some Google ads, we do a lot of Facebook ads, try to stay off free Facebook marketplace ads because I don't like the type of customer that generates sometimes. So
So you're actually buying ads on those platforms.
yeah, we're building and promoting ads there. We do some radio locally.
So the Facebook, Instagram ads, what's the angle? What are you promoting? Who are you targeting with that?
We go to it depends on what we're targeting. So if we're targeting for in our restaurant for the winter, we're doing a 25-mile radius, targeting people between 40 and 70 years old. If we're looking for weddings, we're after a 24 to 50 age group.
And has that been pretty successful for you?
I would say so. I don't think it's money not well spent, but I don't know if it's money well spent, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. But one job leads to another. And do you have a price range, like an average price per person your your catering runs?
That not really. Just because during the winter, in western Nebraska, there's not anything to do. So we'll cater for 5 people to 500. It's you take what you can get.
But let's say in season, is there a sweet spot, that, price range?
Probably, I'm not sure I know the exact number on that. My wife handles a ton of that. And,
Smart man, let the wife handle the money. She
well,
just
I understand I have to do what I'm good at, and she has to do what she's good at. Otherwise, this won't work.
Yeah, I think that that applies to marriages, businesses. I know exactly my lane to stay in, where I do well, and I know what not to do. And I learned this a long time ago. My father tried to get me to cut the yard once, and I cut it crooked. And after a couple of lines, he goes, "Get out of my way, I'll do it." And I never had to do it again. So I think sometimes, even if you know how to do it, you play stupid and let the people who know what they're doing do a good job at it, so you can focus on what you do best. It's a very good lesson learned for everybody. You can't if you try to do everything, nothing gets done well. Surround yourself with great people and let them
Exactly. I
let the
ran a college electrical program for 10 years, training 20 to 25-year-olds. And I always told them, you want to be successful, surround yourself with successful people.
that's for sure. I've been very, very fortunate that I've recruited and retained some good people, have a lot of heart, and you can't put a price tag on that. I want to go back on the certified beef. How often do you quote a price and someone says, "Hey, I can get it here for $2 less or $3 less," and are you explaining why your brisket's better? Do you let them sample it and encourage them to sample the other person's product? How are you dealing with that?
So I don't play the pricing game. I work with my distributors. Once a year, we tell them, here's the amounts we're going to do. You bring to us a price. I understand the price may fluctuate, especially on beef right now. It's going up and down, but we're able to leverage our get a price set for the most part in the beginning. And then, for people that want to haggle price with us, our answer is you pay for what you get.
Yeah. Um, what I used to do is when I came to Nashville, there wasn't a lot of barbecue, and I don't think it was as good as ours. And, of course, I'm going to say that because it's my barbecue, but objectively, and I would tell people, "Hey, come in for a sample and try it." If your product's really good, that definitely is a good way to neutralize that, is with the quality. Try it and see, is it the same quality? And some people don't care about quality, right? They're on a budget, but they're not our customers. I don't want to be the cheapest price. Someone's always going to beat you, but if you've got the best quality.
Well, especially out of our trailers, people are always brisket. So many people cook brisket, and once the Traeger came out, there was a lot of really good barbecuers that were self-proclaimed. And so we just tell them, my kids tell them when we're running at the trailers, you want a sample, take a sample. You don't like it, you're not hurting our feelings, but we're going to take our chances that you're going to be pretty impressed.
Yeah, I think good food sells a lot. The other thing, um, a tactic that I use, there was a company out of Chicago. I think they got their ribs out of Iowa, probably. I don't know if you've ever heard of Zoll Foods. Used to be Castle and Zoll ribs, pork ribs. So what they would do is they would take the rib commodity and they would trim them down for chains based on their specs, right? So Corky's had a 2 1/4 St. Louis cut. That's what we bought. We bought truckloads. We locked in our prices, whatever. So we took a tour of the factory, and you've got this conveyor belt, and all the ribs go where they need to go, and you've got these people with knives and hooks, and they can do this stuff in their sleep, right? I mean, it's crazy. They haven't lost arms and bleeding all over the place. And when I asked the guy, I go, "Hey, these are really good ribs because there's none of the knuckle, there's none of the gristle on it. What percentage of the ribs that come through there meet our specs?" He goes, "Maybe 2%." So I use that as a marketing tool to say, look, only 2% of the ribs that are produced in the country are good enough to meet our specs. Doesn't mean that another 2% isn't equally good. It just means we only picked the two. And I would bet that there's a number that you can attribute to what percentage of the brisket that's sold in the United States is certified Nebraska, good quality, beef.
And
And you can say, hey, only 2% of the briskets in this country are good enough to meet our specs. If you want to save money, go get somebody who brings something in from Mexico. You don't know how the animal's been fed. You don't know whether they used antibiotics, what they've used to keep that animal alive just to get it to the kill house, the slaughterhouse. And there's one more um strategy, in your sales arsenal, because I like to have a lot of little levers. Um,
well, and we do use that for our benefit. We flat out tell people we cook Nebraska beef. We cook certified Nebraska beef coming out of Greater Omaha. Don't care if we're not sponsored by Greater Omaha. Never had a conversation with anybody from Greater Omaha. That's the product we use because I know the people that are raising them. I know the time, effort, work, and energy they put into raising this. And when we're especially up in South Dakota, we tell people, look, we're serving you American beef that's coming out of these sand hills, which are the same sand hills you have.
right.
You know, this is a good quality product. And then we let those guys tell us if it's good or not.
Yeah, I think more and more people do want better quality. There are enough people that will pay for good quality, and those are the best customers to have because they're not beating you up on price. Because, like, let's take something like I like to cook, right? Parmesan cheese. Well, you could buy a million different Parmesan cheeses from that shit in a green can that your mom put on the table, spaghetti night,
Yep.
all the way to the wheel that comes from Italy and it's a gazillion dollars a pound. Well, I might use cheap Parmesan if it's just, you know, feeding kids spaghetti. But if I'm cooking Italian or if I'm making fettuccine Alfredo, I'm going to go buy the expensive stuff because I know that's the difference between crappy tasting fettuccine Alfredo or really good. And I think people are more sophisticated in their palates now than they ever have been. And I think,
Well, going back to the beef side on that exact same thing, I don't know if you're a prime rib eater or not, but I'll bet you at these shops, how many prime ribs you've eaten that aren't from a prime grade animal? It's called
oh,
prime rib,
oh, I'm
not
sure it's probably most of it's if it's at a cheap buffet or a cheap dinner, it's probably choice or no roll. It's probably no roll.
Yeah, it's our this winter we cooked for Christmas. We did a couple 100 pounds of prime ribs, and our distributors, he understands you bring me prime quality meat. I'm not gonna sell you something that's not good quality.
Right. And I think it's important to educate the prospect of what they're getting, because all they see is it's a prime rib that's getting carved and it's pink on the inside. But if you tell them there's different levels, just like a hamburger, you buy a hamburger at McDonald's, it's not the same as a hamburger at Outback or a hamburger at Morton Steakhouse. The guy at Morton Steakhouse is taking all the good scraps and he's making the best hamburger meat you could possibly make. Outback is better than McDonald's, and McDonald's is just a cheap patty. It doesn't mean there's not a market for all of them, but you've got to educate people to that. Now, is there anything else you're doing marketing wise? Do you do any email marketing to your existing customers? Do you call to rebook them? Is there anything else you're doing to proactively increase sales?
So we have a process, let's take a wedding, for example. So you reach out to us, however you reach out, mostly it's direct referral or off our website. We bring you in, have a consultation with a tasting. You set your own menu. We don't provide you a menu. After the wedding's done, we have somebody that calls you, reaches out. And I listened to one of your podcasts earlier, and you were talking about hunters and farmers as
Yeah.
far as building clients and getting sales. And I look at that as my group is more of killers and farmers.
I love
You
killers.
know, yeah. One of my good vending friends calls my kid my my coworker Jimmy Killer. So
So elaborate on what makes them killers.
without sounding arrogant,
No,
what
please
makes
do.
them
Hey, it ain't bragging if it's true. So go ahead and sound arrogant.
without sounding arrogant or without making them sound like horrible people. But if we're sitting up at a fair, my kids absolutely want to drive you into the ground and make you beg for mercy while doing it with a smile on their face, shaking hands, getting out of the trailer and helping an old lady take her fruit to her table, and just building the relationship and the mindset that the relationship and the customer is what matters, but not sit back and wait for it to come to us. Our folks will go get it.
So where do so it's sort of the difference when you go to a restaurant and you've been waited on by somebody who anticipates everything, takes care of you, goes above and beyond, and somebody who, you're having to chase their butt down and they shouldn't be waiting tables because they don't know the first thing about service. Do you find people with those skills, or do you train those skills in people?
I'm a teacher by trade. So I've been coaching, teaching for almost 20 years. So I love to work with young kids, bring them in. We show them how to do this. We give them ownership, we give them decision making, and they just gradually roll into the role we want them to. And then we just get out of their way.
You know, I agree with you. You can make people. I mean, everybody has their boundaries, right? But I do think if you look at Chick-fil-A, every Chick-fil-A you go into, the kids are polite, they're well dressed, they're well groomed, they bend over backwards. My pleasure. It's a totally different vibe than if you walk into any other concept, right? And if I was a parent, I am a parent, but my kids are older, and that would be one of the places I would want my kid to work, not for the money, but for the values that they're picking up that they're not going to pick up someplace else, right? And I would imagine that you probably have some parents who come back years later and go, "Man, thank you so much for giving my kid a job, you help them develop into a great human being. Those are skills you take with you forever, right?
Well, and I have a 3-year policy. I don't want any of my people to be here longer than 3 years. I want them to move on to something else, into a bigger role, especially since they're so young. I don't want them to be tied to us. Go find something, go learn how the world works. If you wanna come back, we'll welcome you with open arms. But, we wanna help you grow, see you grow, and watch you develop.
That's awesome. Is most of your crew seasonal? They work through the season and then
Yeah, yeah. I would say probably 75% are summer, and then the college kids, they come back and help over for Christmas parties for the 2 weeks when they're out on break, and then, you know, weekend stuff here and there.
so busy. Just let's talk about a busy week. How many events would you have in a busy week, whether it's Christmas parties or summer events? Like, paint a picture.
Busy week for us, peak seasons, 3 weddings a weekend, 4 trailer events, probably 6 to 10 catering events during the week, and somewhere between 3 and 8,000 pounds of brisket.
Whew, that's a lot of cows.
A lot of cows.
That's a lot of cows. That now I know why you only sleep 4 to 6 hours a week. A day. Sorry, a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, I'm out of the day to day, but I think my favorite thing about I'm a morning person. I want to get going early, and we would have the pork shoulders come off at 7 o'clock in the morning. And my favorite thing to do was take a pair of tongs and just take some of that outside meat with the tender inside, put it on a bun, throw a little coleslaw and barbecue sauce on it, and have it for breakfast. It doesn't get better than that.
No, there's no better piece of meat than a piece of pork shoulder like that.
Yeah, and brisket too. I love good brisket. And luckily, I'm down at the beach. There's this place called Bag Beach Barbecue. I'd put their brisket against anything I've had in Texas. They have big trailers in the parking lot. It's all hardwood. It's not, there's no Traeger, there's no Southern Prides, no Old Hickories. It's all done. Somebody sitting there babysitting that thing, and you can tell. And a lot of times I'll just buy a couple of pounds and cut up in blocks and put in my freezer, cryovac it. We made some barbecue nachos last night for dinner because it's like I didn't really want to do anything, but to make those, God, I'm getting starving just thinking about it right now. Now, do y'all, I'm assuming you carve or pull on site. You're not pre-pulling or pre-slicing the meat.
Both. Depends on where we're going.
Depends on how far you're going, how big the event, how many people you got to feed.
You
Awesome.
know, when we're up in Sturgis, we're cooking 24/7 up there because there's just no way for with everything else going on. Same when we're down at campus, but when we're local and doing some of the stuff, we're transporting.
Yeah. Everybody talks about the successes. I've probably learned more through people's failures and mistakes, learning from, somebody listening. And again, barbecue operator that would love to get to the point where they're doing 3 weddings and have trailers and 6 events during the week, and they're just really blowing out the doors. What are 3 mistakes you see that you could tell somebody, hey, avoid? Here's 3 things I could tell you to avoid to help you grow better, have less problems, make more money, whatever it is.
The first mistake is paying attention to what everybody's doing and not being yourself. If you're not yourself, you have no chance of succeeding. The second mistake is telling everybody that you're the best. If you self-proclaim to be the best and you're not the best and they've eaten something better, I think you're in trouble.
Right.
And then the third is not knowing your numbers, not knowing what percentage of throwaway when you cook a 12 to 15-pound brisket, what percentage of that you're not even going to get because of laying in the bottom of your cooker.
Right. For sure. Where did you come from a business family or business background, or how did you learn that? Because I told both my kids, I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do because you're adults and you're going to go do your own thing, and I'm not living your life. However, not asking my opinion, I'd say become a CPA because you never go broke if you know the numbers, right? But you could be the best sales guy in the world. I know a guy who's very good at sales, but he's terrible with the numbers. It doesn't matter what you sell if you don't know how to keep it and how to manage it. Where'd you learn the numbers side? Did you learn it because you got your ass handed to you on a platter after the first, couple of months, or you have a family background in business and, your dad or grandfather taught you numbers?
No, I've always been business minded since I've been little. I never really understood the numbers until I was probably in my mid 20s, and I had another business, and it was successful, but it wasn't because I didn't understand the numbers. Like, it was super big, but it made no money because I had no and I was just happy I had grown a big business, and I didn't know the numbers, and it just didn't last.
What, just out of curiosity, what industry was that?
That was when XM satellite radio was a big thing.
Were you installing XM satellite radios or
No, we're the number 2 sales, um, company in the country.
really? That had to be cool. Were you selling it to dealership, like car
Oh, all
dealership?
over, all over. I
Wow.
learned a lot of lessons doing that.
It's funny. I've been in the barbecue space forever and I've interviewed a lot of guys and I've met a lot of guys. I've found that the guys who know how to sell are always the guys that are the most successful. Now, whether it's knocking on doors or however, th- th- that is just a common thread that I see over and over again. And the operators that are scared to sell, if you're scared to sell or you're not a promoter, go hire you one because nothing happens if you don't know how to talk to people, how to sell them, upsell them, gain their trust, get them to come back. You can make the best barbecue in the world, but if you don't know how to sell it, you're just sitting with a cooler full of product nobody wants.
Well, and that goes back to my kids and why we call them killers is they will upsell you. They're not gonna hound you, but they're gonna say, "Look, we want your feedback, we want your return business, and we wanna make sure that you're happy with it."
Yeah. So I'm sure you're familiar with Cutco knives.
Oh, yeah.
I made my son a deal before we went off to college. I said, "You sell Cutco knives for a summer. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done, but I'll match you dollar for dollar up to 3 grand." And I had to cut him a $3,000 check out of my pocket. And it's better than what he learned going to Vanderbilt. He might argue with me, but I promise you, selling Cutco for a summer, he learned so much more than he ever did at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, we actually had there's a Cutco knife rep that sits just across from us at one of the big fairs in South Dakota.
And I bet he's
I buy some if they have better handles.
there. I got to tell you, their knives are great. I've got them, and I've loved them, and but it's one of those things you can say I have the best knife because they are the best. I mean, they're just a phenomenal. And if you can sell those things, um, it's amazing. There's one guy you'd appreciate this having been in direct sales. His whole thing is he's the top Cutco distributor in the country. He'll laser engrave on the knives for gifts. So let's say that you had a big client, right? And they had plants all over Nebraska. You might want to buy them a set. Well, now you're going to go buy them a $1,500 set of knives, and it's got his, custom made for Joe Blow, and the logo of the company. Well, every time that guy picks up those knives, he's gonna think Jim got me those knives, right? So it's an evergreen crowd of people who want to give nice gifts to people that aren't going to buy for themselves, and they see that logo. So very interesting. Any other tips you want to give people about large events before we wrap this up?
Large events are just like small events. It takes the same amount of work to pull a large event off as it does a small event. You just got to have better staffing and organization. People that aren't organized in this business, they die.
I would agree with that. Definitely good systems. And, I'll share a couple of stories. Uh, this is probably my favorite. We did an event for Vanderbilt University, 5,000 people. They wanted us to make sandwiches. And I was like, God, how are we going to make all these sandwiches? You got thousands of people, 5,000 people at this event. So I don't know how I even came up with this. We took, the clamshells you put sandwiches in. We basically figured out if you open up the clamshell and you put the bottom on one half and the top on the other half and stack them up, we bought custom made cardboard boxes. So like 3-4 days before, we would put, let's say 25 in a box or 30, whatever. And we use food grade trash can liner. And then we would wrap it so it'd be airtight and you couldn't dry out. So all our staff had to do is open the box and create an assembly line. You already have the box, the clamshell, the bottom and the top, and then you're just using a portion scoop. And we were able to it was like a assembly line. Without having all that pre-planning, it would have been a nightmare. So definitely.
Yeah, when I taught, my boss, he used to get irritated with me because every morning we'd come into the shop and I'd have the guys, we'd lay out a plan, and I'd have them prep for the plan, and then we had a certain amount of time for execution, and we might have to work some 12 to 18-hour days to get the execution done and on time, but it always got done because it was systematic.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about software is I'm able to take systems and computerize them. It's like, how can you solve a problem so somebody's working less and more efficiently and it's replicable, right? Because you might be the best barbecue caterer in the world, but there's only so much you can do. You're going to do better by everybody else following your systems, and you're the orchestra leader, and you get people following your systems and following it to the letter. That's how you go. I mean, it's almost like McDonald's. They don't have the best burger, but they run a good business because everything's systematized.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been a pleasure catching up with you. I appreciate your time and sharing, and I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon and try to stay warm out there.
All right. Thank you, sir. I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Barbecue Catering Smarts, where we bring you the best ideas, stories, and strategies from across the barbecue catering industry. We hope today's episode sparked new insights to help you refine your systems, elevate your customer experience, and grow your catering profits. For more episodes and insights, be sure to subscribe, share, and join us next time.